So thank you so much for joining us tonight for our webinar, Top Strategies for Standout Personal Statements with Julian Hoffman and Michael Guerrero. So we are joined by Julian, who is an experienced mentor and college admissions counselor with nearly a decade of expertise guiding students and families through their admissions process. In addition to his work supporting hundreds of students in gaining admission to universities nationwide, Julian has served as an admissions reader for the University of California, giving him valuable insight into what makes an application stand out. We're also joined by Michael Guerrero, who is an admissions expert with a decade of experience helping students navigate high-stakes academic transitions. Having evaluated over 3,000 applications annually as an assistant director of admissions at Boston University and served as an admissions reader for Dartmouth College, Michael possesses a deep behind-the-scenes understanding of what makes a candidate competitive at selective institutions. So we are joined by both of them tonight. Whenever you guys have any questions, please just put them in the Q&A box. We will be going over those at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to put anything during the webinar there, and we will get to it. And thank you so much for joining us. Take it away.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much again for joining. We're really excited to have you here. So we'll jump to the next slide. And it is, what is the personal statement? So that's the whole reason we're here today, is to figure out how to write the personal statement, what we should be doing with it. We'll talk about the do's and don'ts. We'll talk about some helpful tips on what to do. But to get things started, let's just kind of define what the personal statement is. So go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to break down the personal statement for you. So the personal statement, or typically also known as the Common Application main essay, is a very, very, very important component of a successful application. So first things first, what it looks like. It's 650 words maximum. I know that sounds scary, but it's a lot easier than it sounds. So 650 words typically turns out to about 1.5 pages single spaced. And what it is it's more of a narrative style essay. So what I mean by narrative style is that you're kind of thinking and writing about it in a way that it's like a short personal story. Your personal essay isn't supposed to be like a list of accomplishments or about somebody else or about an activity that you did. It's about you. And the key word here is personal statement about me. So when you're writing this, you really want to think about it like a short story or something about you, something that really highlights your character, highlights who you are, and who you've become throughout these last 4 years or throughout your life. And by 4 years, I mean 4 years of high school. So when you start, and we'll go into some kind of helpful tips and ways to start these, but like sometimes a lot of students will start their personal statements by opening like in the middle of a moment. And then so like in the action, going like walking us through a specific moment and then going through the story and telling us what that means to you. But the main thing about the personal statement, and that's very, very important, is it needs to be 30 to 40% storytelling and then 60 to 70% reflection. So less than half of your personal statement should be the story. So what is it that you're trying to tell us? And then 60 to 70%, the bulk of this is the reflection. So what we're trying to see in the personal statement is who you are, why you are who you are, what defines you as a person, what is this experience, or what are the things that truly make you who you are. And you really want to focus your personal statement on the bulk of that, because the last thing you want an admissions reader to do is to say, well, okay, that was a really great story about their Aunt Mildred, but I didn't really get to know about the student. And I didn't get to know about who they are or what is important to them or what difference they're going to make on my campus or who they will be on my campus. Your personal statement is your way to show them the values that are important to you, the qualities that make you who you are, and the experiences you've had that have led you to those values and characteristics. When you write this, you don't want to be extremely formal. So you don't want to use a bunch of flowery language and you don't want to use like words. You don't want to make it to sound like you looked at a thesaurus before you wrote this because admissions readers will see that and they'll say, I know students don't use that language in their everyday life, so they're swinging too hard. You want to try to make it conversational. You want to make it as if you're telling them the story about you. Think of it as if you're doing an interview. It's okay to get creative with these essays and use different styles of writing, but you don't want to make it too over the top to where you lose your voice in the actual essay. Now, why in the world does the personal statement matter? I kind of explained most of this a few minutes ago, but the personal statement is read by all of the colleges you apply to through the Common Application. So I want you to think about the UCs, the University of California. They are their own entity. They are their own application. They will not see a personal statement. The Cal States also will not see a personal statement, nor will they see any essays because you don't submit any essays to the Cal States. But the schools that you're applying to through the Common Application, and some examples are Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, Purdue University, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, all of these schools, they will see your personal statement. Um, and like I was saying before, it demonstrates who you are beyond your test scores and your grades. Your grades and your AP scores and your SAT, those only paint one picture. They paint academic you. But in your personal statement, we want to see you and what makes you unique. And the other thing is it really creates an emotional and or intellectual connection with the reader. It shows them who you are and it gives them a reason to admit you and why they want to say yes to you. So, okay, we can go to the next slide. Now, there's a big difference. It's not really a typical essay, and I kind of want to expand on what I was saying earlier is with the personal statement, what I usually tell students is that it's very, very different from a typical essay you'd be writing, like an academic essay in your English class. So, as written on this PowerPoint, an academic essay is a more structured piece that develops and supports an argument or idea using evidence, analysis, or examples. Now, the thing that makes the personal statement kind of tricky, but you get used to it once you start, practicing a little bit more and continuing to write. But the thing that makes it a little difficult is up until now in high school, there really aren't a lot of English teachers or classes where you're writing about yourself. So when you're typically writing an English essay, you're writing in primary voice, so it's objective and it's third person. Most of the time you're completely removed from an English essay. You're not writing about you. You're not using verbiage like I think or I feel. You're really observing something and you're making a case about something. The subject of an English essay is almost always someone or something else, unless your English teacher specifically tells you to write about yourself. Structure is typically pretty rigid. It's usually a 5 paragraph essay, and it can change, but most of the time it doesn't really change. Um, and the goal of an English essay most of the time is to prove a thesis. So when you're writing these essays in English, everything kind of comes back to your thesis, that one main sentence. And every paragraph, every quote, every piece of information that you include is there to prove a point. You're kind of saying, in these like academic essays, here's what I believe and here's all my evidence. All of that kind of goes out the window when you're writing a personal statement because it's all about you. It's all I statements. It's all things that have happened to me. It's authentic. You're writing in first person. There's a lot of internal reflection. There's a lot of self growth that you're going to be hopefully presenting in that. Um, it's also like more fluid when it comes to structure. So you don't typically have to follow that 5 paragraph essay format. You can, which is fine, but you don't have to. A lot of times I've seen and helped students write very different styles of personal statements. There are students who will write in a montage format, which is kind of looking at something specific and pulling out key qualities and connecting it to you. There are very different ways to go about it. And the ultimate goal, like I've been saying the last few minutes, is to show readers who you are. That is the most important thing. Now, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the themes in your Common App main essay or personal statement are listed below. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the themes, and I kind of want to walk you through like some examples of what you might find or what you might write about. And then in my next slide, we'll show you the actual essays. We're just going to kind of look quickly at that because I want you to look at those on your own time when you get some more time. But for the key themes for the personal statement, what you want to do is you want to choose the prompt that best fits your story. Everybody has a different story, and everybody has a story. So don't think that you don't have a story. Everybody does. Now, the first essay is usually, or not usually, it is centered around background and identity. So if there's something about you, about your background that really means something to you, now is the time to share it. So, for example, maybe you grew up in a very small town and that upbringing, even though it was in a very small town, shaped the way that you saw the world. And maybe it gave you a stronger sense of community and is the driving force behind why you have this hunger to explore the world and see the world. So, showing us who you are based on where you come from. Um, Now, with the example that I shared with you about the town, like you're writing about how you grew up in a small town, the point is not to talk about the town and all about the people and how the people are amazing and shaped you. It's about kind of how growing up there revealed something about who you are. The next one is about overcoming obstacles. So this is prompt number 2. Now, let me just stop here and say you don't have to write every single one of these. You pick only one and you write one 650-word essay. So the second prompt that you can choose is about overcoming obstacles. This is to discuss some type of significant challenge that you might have had. I'm going to jump back to challenge in a second, but an example, think like maybe your family at some point in your life, you went through like a period of extreme financial hardship. But you wouldn't just be writing about the financial hardship and saying, like, woe is me, this challenge, it made me so sad and it was really hard for my family. It's not what you want to do. You want to write about what you learned, who you became because of it. So maybe your family had this financial hardship and you took on a part-time job and that shifted your perspective on what you value and what you want to do with your future and who you are. So admissions readers like to see things like resilience and self-awareness. And this overcoming obstacles prompt is a way for you to say, here's this challenge I faced, but I'm not going to harp on this challenge. Here's what I learned from it. And that's the 60 to 70% self-reflection and what I learned. And that's what most of your essay needs to be about. The next one is challenging a belief or idea. So this one, um, I like this prompt, and I'll explain why. Um, think about it this way. Maybe there was something in your life that you always assumed, you always believed something was true, but in the end, you realized that you were wrong. Um, Maybe like you grew up in a community where everybody around you looked exactly the same, thought the same things, believed the same things. And then you became friends with somebody who changed your worldview, who told you something, and you thought, like, wow, that is not exactly what I thought. And that completely changed and transformed who I am. And then you carried yourself throughout life doing something completely different and learned so much about yourself. That essay would be about that experience and basically what you did with it. Admissions readers want to see that you are somebody who can encounter and embrace differences, that you don't just believe your own beliefs, that you are willing to listen to others and respect their beliefs and learn from them and be changed because of them. The next one, I always love this essay. It's about gratitude and its impact. Maybe there was somebody in your life that just completely inspired you. It could be a family member, it could be a sibling, it could be a cousin, it could be a teacher, somebody who just really impacted you in some type of way and made you who you are today and inspired you to live your life the way that you do and to get involved in the activities that you do or the community service that you've done. The essay, this one can be a little tricky because sometimes students tend to write too much about the person and not enough about themselves. So you have to be very, very mindful about how you write this essay because it's not giving me the story about your teacher. It's giving me the story about how they changed you and why you're thankful for being and having that experience with them. Um, the essay about personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. I also really, really love this prompt. Now, this one could be something like taking on a leadership role that nobody else would, and you maybe realize that you were completely a better leader than you ever thought you would be. Another way to go about this essay, you might be a little shocked, but it's always, I think, a really, really good idea sometimes to go and get deep and think about something more serious, like a mistake you made. So maybe you had a big argument with a friend, and maybe you said something you regretted, and you both said things that you regretted, but and maybe the friendship or something suffered and your life was very different. But and here's the because you're probably wondering like why in the world would I want to harp on something so negative? The point of that isn't to harp on all of the negatives, it's to talk about how you've grown. So, and that's the entire theme of this essay is personal growth. So, why would you maybe want to talk about an experience where you did something that you regretted or you were wrong? The reason is because number one, it's all about how you write this essay. So you really want to, you need to make sure that you articulate it properly and that you don't talk bad about other people. But um, the reason this is a good option or can be a good option if you've had an experience like this is because admission readers really, really appreciate when you're open and honest about your flaws. We admissions readers, and as somebody who's read in admissions, I know that not everybody is perfect. We all make mistakes, but it's what you learn from those mistakes that makes you human. It shows us that you have that self-awareness to grow and to change and to want to grow and change because now you're showing me I know that something that I might have similar experiences in life in college, but I have the maturity to admit my faults and to say that I want to grow and to say that I want to change. Because if a student claims that they've never failed at anything, I don't believe them. I don't think that you're being honest with yourself. We've all had those moments. And having the courage to admit that in an essay and show that you can face those problems head on is really, really beautiful and is really powerful for admissions. The next one, this is a really, really tricky one. I actually very rarely have student. I don't think I've only had one student, I think, in my many, many years of doing this, do this prompt. The one, it's a topic that captivates you. So I don't know, maybe you're really interested in horror movies and you are watching it and you're terrified and you start thinking, why do I enjoy these horror movies? Why am I paying to be terrified? And then you go down a rabbit hole and you start thinking about psychology and I don't know, what triggers the neurological reaction to face real danger and to experience danger. And then you start realizing that you have this immense passion for understanding how the mind works. It could be a really cool essay, but this one is very tricky because you run the risk of talking too much about the topic and not enough about you. You really have to focus on how you are somebody who can get deep into something. And then the final one is a topic of your choice. It's really for those students who just can't find their story in any of these other options. And this is a way for them to just write freely. And it's kind of like a almost a free prompt. Something I probably wouldn't recommend is doing something like a letter to somebody or a letter to yourself. Um, Admissions readers have said that those can be a little gimmicky. So You have to be smart about doing that one, but it really is kind of a catch-all if you're like, I've read all of these prompts and I can't find anything. Um, so those are the overall themes and just some ways that you can think about what you can write about these. Now, if you can just jump to the next slide, please, quickly. Um, these are the common application personal statement prompts. Um, I don't want to read through every single one of them because that would take the entire session. But you can find these on if you just search up in Google common application main essay prompts, you'll see these. It's probably the first link that pops up, but this is the full essay. It reflected time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea, what prompted your thinking, what was the outcome, and so forth. So hopefully those examples will get you to start getting the gears turning, or parents, maybe you to start getting the gears turning about, hey, remember when you had that situation at the zoo and a lion almost got out of its cage and it made you passionate about veterinary and doing medicine. So start thinking about those experiences in life that you've had and start writing them down. Start putting them down in a notebook. Um, and then, of course, go over the personal statement prompts. Now, the next slide, please. Okay, so some quick strategies, the do's and the don'ts. If you could just, yeah, there we go. Thank you. So number one, do brainstorm effectively. Brainstorming right now is your best friend. Write down as many ideas as you can. Write down the values that you feel you embody. Write down what your characteristics are. Write down who you feel you are today. Think about specific stories, specific moments that happened in school and just write everything down so you have it there. So then you can write and try different things. Make the mundane insightful. Sometimes the most ordinary of things become the most interesting essays. I've heard of a student who wrote an essay about shoes, and you're probably thinking, shoes? What do you mean, shoes? Well, those shoes, they had apparently done a lot of traveling and they talked about what those shoes meant to them and how they were important to them because they had all of these experiences in these different countries and what they learned about themselves throughout the process. So even the simplest of things can be the most interesting essays. It just depends on what you do with those things. Use sensory details. We'll look over that in a few minutes in one of our next slides. Be specific. Try your best not to draw out too much information because the reader will very quickly just skip over that. Try to be as specific as possible, get to the point, and the most important thing is answer so what. The last thing you want to do is somebody to look at your essay and then when they finish a sentence say, okay, so what? What was the point of that? Explain it, but be as specific as possible. Minimize essay overlap. We're going to go over that in one of our next slides. And revise and get feedback. Though try not to get feedback from too many people because when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, it can be a little bit of a disaster. So just try to use a few trusted resources, an advisor, your parents, a teacher you trust, and so forth. Try not to ask all of your friends to read it because everybody has a different opinion about how an essay should be written. Do not recite your activities list. The activities lists are there for a reason. We know about your activities because we see them in the activities list. We don't need a cover letter to send us with your resume. Like we don't need that. We already have your activities. This common application main essay is to tell us your story. Don't try to fixate on the perfect topic. I cannot stress this enough. I've had many students who have tried so hard to find the perfect topic that at the end of the day, it just becomes the essay won't be as strong as it can be. And you just have to write from the heart. That is my advice to you. Write from the heart. Don't try to find the perfect topic. It doesn't have to be the Costco essay. It doesn't have to be why I love the letter S or whatever the essay. It doesn't need to be that. It doesn't need to be that incredibly deep. It just needs to be something about you and personal to you. Um, yes, brainstorm ideas, but don't try to find something that's going to be perfect because perfection does not exist. Don't think that you have nothing to write about. I said that earlier. Everybody has a story. I promise you, you have a story. And I work with so many students, and it's all about doing brainstorming sessions together. I will spend over an hour going through their activities with them, asking them, so what? What does that mean to you? And a lot of the times in those sessions, and even when you start writing or when they start writing, they'll say, wow, like I never thought about it that way. And that's exactly what you need to do when you brainstorm is think about things in ways that you never thought you would have before. Don't assume you need a sob story. Not everybody has a challenge, and that is completely fine. We know that not everybody has had extremely difficult circumstances. You don't need to write a sob story to have a powerful essay. I've worked with many students who have had very powerful essays that were not sob stories. Don't use cliche or inappropriate topics. Don't use something about like, oh, the team was it was in the last 5 minutes, and then we finally scored the goal, yada yada yada. Been done. Try to think bigger, think different. Try not to use things that people are always using every single time. Like I was saying before, don't make another person the main focus. This is an essay about you. They are not admitting Aunt Sue or Grandma Marie. They're not. They're admitting you. They want to know about you. They can be part of your essay, but it should be a little teeny, teeny, teeny bit, not the entire thing. And then also very important, don't worry about the word count early on. Trust me, you don't want to be like, oh, I only have 650 words. Get everything out on paper because it's very, very possible that what you've written in your 700 or 800 word, that part of the essay, that we could say like, oh, that's really interesting. Let's use that. Throw all of your words onto the paper and then we cut words later. Very easy, way easier to cut words than it is to add. So those are the do's and don'ts. And then we can jump to the next slide. We're going to start talking about how to do these, how to put these into practice for so a lot of the do's that I said, we're going to talk about those. So I'm going to pass it off to Michael.
Thank you, Julian. Miranda, do you mind going back to the previous slide? Julian, thank you so much. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss, so I'm really excited about this presentation. I do want to remind you all to use the Q&A function, so if you do have questions throughout this presentation, don't forget to use the Q&A function to ask your questions, and we'll answer some of those questions towards the end of the session. Now that we've talked about what the personal statement is, let's shift into how do we actually make this essay good? And again, I'll be direct with you. You're applying in a very competitive landscape. Strong grades and activities may get you into the conversation, but the essay is really going to help admissions officers understand the person behind that profile. So when we talk about best practices, we're not talking about tricks. We're not talking about cheating the system. We're talking about strategy here. So the best essays are not always about the biggest events in your life. They're often about a very specific moment. They're written honest, they're reflective. They highlight aspects of you that are nowhere else in the application, right? And the reader's going to understand something new that's meaningful about you. So as we go through these next slides, I really want you to keep this question top of mind. After reading my essay, what would an admissions officer know about me that they couldn't learn anywhere else in the application? So, Miranda, going into the next slide, which is going to lead us into our first best practice, making sure each essay is doing a different job. Now, this slide is very important because most students are not writing just one essay, okay? You do have that Common App personal statement that most of you will have to do. But some of you will have that UC personal insight questions essay. There's about 4 of them that you have to answer. You also have the supplemental essays that each school will ask you to write about. There are honors college essays that you potentially have to write. There are scholarship essays, and sometimes some schools will ask you major specific prompts, right? Like, why do you want to go into engineering? Why are you interested in pre-med? So there are many potential essays that you have to write. And one of the biggest mistakes that students sometimes make is using every essay to say the same thing. So I'll give you an example. Let's say a student is writing their personal statement about being the captain of the soccer team, right? Then their leadership supplemental essay is also about soccer. And then when they have to write about the community essay, they also talk about soccer again, right? So at this point, even if the essays are really well written, right, the application starts to feel one-dimensional. So you want to avoid that at all cost. I think that the goal is really not to prove the same strength 8 billion times. The goal is to really to show range, right? Who you are, because you are not one-dimensional. Maybe one of your essays can be about leadership. Another essay can showcase your intellectual curiosity, right? Another essay can show your family responsibilities. Another one can show how creative you are, how devoted to service you are, your cultural background, your ability to be resilient during difficult times. One of my favorites is humor. When a student can make me laugh when I'm reading your personal essay, you get a check in my book. So I love humor when it's implemented in your essay, right? And again, I want to repeat this. You are not one dimensional, and your application should not read like you are. So this is very important for you all at Poly because many of you have very layered experiences. You have rigorous academics at your school. You have arts. You have athletics. You're active. Your jobs, family responsibility, and honestly, by just living in Los Angeles, that gives you a very particular perspective. So you really want to use the full application to show different sides of you. And that's what you want to do with your essays. So even before you start writing, map out your topics, right? Ask yourself, what is my personal essay going to reveal about me? What is my supplemental essay going to reveal about me? What will my activities list already cover about what I'm doing, right? If something is already obvious elsewhere in your application, your essay should probably go deeper. Julian mentioned this a billion times. Gotta go deeper, right? Or go into a totally different direction. So once we really understand that every essay needs a purpose, the next question becomes, how do we find the right story in the first place? So Miranda, I'll ask you to go to the next slide. And this is where brainstorming comes in. This is one of my favorite slides because a lot of students freeze when it comes to the brainstorming piece because they think they need the perfect topic. I think Julian hinted at this, that before you start writing, don't think you need that perfect topic, right? Because most of the strong essays begin with a random thought, right? They begin with a potential question, a memory that comes to mind, an object, an argument they had with their friends. So just think about that and just start putting pen to paper, okay? So on the slides, some of the prompts that we are asking you to use as you're brainstorming is to really help you get you unstuck. For example, I used to believe X, but now I'm Y, right? I think that's a powerful way to really to structure your essay because colleges really care about growth, right? Another example is some people think I am X, but I'm actually Y. That can reveal how complex you are and how non-one dimensional you are. Another example is one thing nobody knows about me is, right? That can lead usually to a more personal or less obvious essay, right? I also really love this ordinary object exercise because if you look around your room right now, wherever you are, in your living room, in the kitchen, in a restaurant or in a coffee shop, wherever you are right now, look around, right? That's going to probably reveal something about you, right? Not the obvious things. Don't pick the obvious objects like a trophy. that you got awarded, or just things that are obvious about you, right? Pick something else, right? Maybe is a cracked phone that you use to put films together with your friends, or maybe, like Julian said, a worn out pair of sneakers that have been everywhere around the world. Maybe is a recipe card from your grandmother. It can be a sketchbook, a bus pass. I had a student who wrote an essay about a bus pass in New York City and how that helped him get exposed to the many different boroughs, right? So again, it doesn't have to be an obvious object. It can be something that really resonates with who you are, right? So for all you in this room right here, this can be specifically useful because everyone around you, you may think that they have these really impressive ideas and essays, but again, the essay, in my opinion, doesn't have to sound impressive. I think it's about sounding real and highlighting who you are. So when you are brainstorming, don't judge your idea too quickly, all right? Do not judge it. Just generate material, pen to paper, and just write. Let it be sort of like a just whatever pops in your brain, just put it on paper, right? Write badly first. When I'm working with my students, it's okay to be a terrible writer at first, okay? So make a list, tell stories out loud. If you don't want to write, use your phone, use voice notes, right? Just get started. So next slide, please. Okay, so I think that in this slide, I'm going to bring up one of the most important points, I think, in this presentation is that, and I think Julian mentioned this a couple times as well, is that you don't need a dramatic life event, right? You do not have to go through hardships. You do not have to suffer, and you don't have to write about that to have a powerful personal statement. I think that students often assume that the essay has to be about trauma, about a huge victory, or a life-changing moment, but it really doesn't, right? Some of the best essays I read at Dartmouth and Boston University were just about ordinary things, right? About cooking with your grandmother. But make sure you don't talk too much about your grandmother because I would want to admit her and not you, right? I've worked with students who wrote essays about fixing a bike, translating, immigration letters for their families, working a part-time job, getting lost in a foreign company, right? Or even for my engineering folks, building something that breaks, right? And still probably doesn't work right now, right? So it's about really thinking outside the box and thinking of some ideas that reflect who you are, right? I think reflection is the purpose of this exercise and being reflective on your experience. Now, this slide is going to give you some tools. The first tool that we're telling you to use is to start in the middle of the action, right? Don't spend time in your first paragraph explaining your entire life story. Like Julian said, drop us right into a moment. Is it an argument with your friends? Is it dinner at a restaurant? Is it somewhere in Peru in top of a mountain somewhere, right? Drop us specifically into that point. The second tool we're asking you to use is create a hook and a conclusion that feel connected. That first line is going to pull me in. You want to reel that admissions reader in with that first line. And then that last line is going to leave us with a clearer sense of who you are. Okay. The third tool is to dig deep. We've already mentioned that a couple hundred times in this presentation, but I can't stress this enough. Dig deep. Okay. The essay, I believe, should answer, how did this experience change the way I think, how I act, or how I understand myself, right? And then the last and fourth tool is show, don't tell. I can't tell you how many times I say this at any given cycle. Please show us, right? Show us. Don't tell me. Don't tell me that you are determined. Don't tell me that you love to learn, right? Instead, show us the late nights, right? Burning the midnight oil. Show us that mistake or that revision that you had to do a billion times, right? That moment that you didn't want to quit and you kept going. Show us. Don't tell me, all right? And for you all here in this call, I think, again, Julian mentioned this before, the mundane can actually work in your favor, okay? A reader sees thousands of essays about winning competitions, about being the best and being on top. We see those every single cycle, but fewer students have the gift and the ability to take a small moment and make it thoughtful, make it vivid, and make it fun for admissions readers to read, right? So again, reflection, drop us into that moment and make it your own. Miranda, next slide, please. Excellent. Now, this slide shows why students need to take supplemental essays very serious. Now, these are not throwaway prompts as you may think. In many ways, I think supplemental essays um, are a way for colleges to ask, how will you think? How will you contribute? And how are you going to engage on campus? I think that some of these prompts are asking about inclusion, discrimination, leadership. I think I saw a question in the chat about getting along with your roommate, right? Problem solving, intellectual curiosity. Those are really big ideas. And because the Supreme Court decided to limit the use of, race conscious admissions, many colleges have made it a point to ask students to really reflect about their lived experiences, their identity, their community, how do they contribute to a community? Well, obviously staying within the legal parameters, but this is a question that they want to make sure that you're able to answer. So it means that students should be thoughtful about their own experiences and how these experiences have shaped their own perspectives, right? And to give you an example, I personally think that a strong answer to these prompts usually has three parts. The first one is as a very specific example, an honest reflection, and a forward-looking connection. For example, if a prompt is asking you about inclusion, don't just say, I value diversity. Show me, right? Show, don't tell. Show me that moment when you helped create belonging. Show me that moment where you recognize a blind spot. Show me that moment where you learned from someone who's like vastly different from you, right? So again, for all of you in here, this is where your school environment can be a strength. I know that Poly is very large, is diverse. There's a dynamic community there. So think about that, right? Think about when you've collaborated with people who are different from you on your campus right now, who are different, who advocate for things that are different from you, and then find yourself within those experiences. Next slide, please. And then once you know what you want to say, I think the next step is making that writing feel alive, okay? I want that writing to feel alive in that page. And this slide is all about making the reader feel present in that moment. I think sometimes, and this is not a big deal, your first draft sometimes can be too general, right? Tell us what happened. Sometimes you do tell us what happened, but they don't really tell us how you went through that experience, right? In this slide, we're letting you know that sensory details help because they create texture, right? What did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? What did you taste? What did you feel? Those details is what's going to bring your essay to life, right? But I do want to be clear, okay? Don't go overboard. Sensory details is not a decoration, right? We're not just adding pretty language just to sound poetic and prophetic, right? I think the details that you add should serve a purpose to your story. So if you're writing about cooking with your grandmother, as I always like to mention, what was that smell like, right? I think in the slides you can see the smell of garlic and onion, right? Those things matter because they bring that memory to life. They showcase family, culture, comfort, right? So if you are writing, for example, about a performance, talk about those lights and how hot they are when you're on stage, right? So again, think back to that moment and think of all these sensory details that you can bring in. Be specific, but also be selective in the words that you're using. So if anyone else could write exactly the same sentence that you've written, it's probably too generic, right? So if the sentences feel like it came from your cultural memory and who you are, your actual voice, right? You're moving in that right direction. Miranda, next slide, please. Julian, I think you're up.
All right. Thank you, Michael. That was so amazing. Now just a little, here are some example sentences just to show you really what it means when we say be specific. So I learned a lot of interesting information during my science course last year. Okay, so did everybody else. But what if you said something like, last year, I gained a technical understanding of the DNA replication process in AP biology. Definitely gives us more information and more depth. I used to go to my grandmother's house during the summer, and it was fun. I did too. So then what if you get a little bit more specific? Every August, I made the long drive from Boston to Amherst, where I spent 2 weeks with my grandmother harvesting heirloom tomatoes in her garden. Much more specific, a lot more detail, gives us that imagery. We can see the tomatoes, those big red tomatoes. We can see the green in the garden. I can visualize. That's what I want to see. I'm interested in pursuing medicine because I want to help people one day. Hmm, that's great. But what if I'm interested in pursuing medicine with a focus on prosthetic care and hope to assist amputee patients in their physiological and psychological rehabilitation? Now you're going from, okay, so does every person who does medicine wants to help people one day. That's why they're doing medicine. But now, when you're getting specific, you're showing me what you want to do. You're showing me what you're passionate about. You're showing me a side of medicine, why you're inspired by it, what you specifically want to do. That's what you want to do with your personal statement. You also want to do this with your UC personal insight questions and your supplemental essays. You want to be as specific as possible. You don't need to go too crazy and over the top with the imagery and talking about like the fiery orbs and all of that, but give us more details. Show us that you can get a little deeper. And it also, I think, shows that like you have a strength for writing. And of course, like with support from an advisor or whoever else, like they could help you give in those extra details, but try to be a little bit more detailed and specific as you're writing out these first few drafts. Okay, you can go to the next slide, please. Now, revision and feedback. So this is very, very important. Number one, please, the personal statement is not something you do overnight. So you really, really want to start early. And you definitely don't want to do it overnight because if there are, and I'm sure there are students here, if you are somebody who did procrastinate on an English essay once and had to write it overnight, you know how hard and stressful it is. Don't do the same with the personal statement. So the best essays are written over time. If you write it in one night, I guarantee you it will not show who you truly are. You'll struggle. It might have grammatical errors. You really want to take time to make it powerful. So give yourself time to brainstorm and draft and revise. Don't think because once you have it, if you wait until the deadline, it's not fun. And it also gives you time to edit and refine and improve and tweak and change. So, that goes into the next one. Don't think that you can really finish this in like one or two drafts. It really, I've never had a student who wrote it in one draft. So, revision is really where all of the magic happens. It's where you are able to pull more details from your story. It's where you're able to expand on things that maybe where you didn't have enough information. Um, Plan for 3 to 5 drafts. There are even moments where I've had students do more than 5 drafts, but once you do more than 5 drafts, personally, I think you're overthinking and you're trying too hard to make it perfect. So I think the sweet spot is 3 to 5. 5 would probably be max for me. Now this also goes into like seeking feedback. They all of these kind of like overlap and blend into one another. Feedback from trusted advisors can definitely help catch your blind spots, improve clarity, and strengthen your overall message. But like I said earlier, really make sure that you limit it to a few individuals because one thing is that you will notice if you ask 5, 6, 7 people, almost everybody has a different opinion. Everybody has an opinion about how that sentence should be written, what you should be writing about, how you should structure that paragraph. And you'll leave those meetings with those people more confused than you will coming out with clarity. And trust me, I've had a student, I told them, I said, be very, very careful. Don't keep asking people. And then a few months later, they were really stressed. And I said, well, were you asking a bunch of different people? And they said, yeah, I did. And I kind of regret it. And I was like, don't make the mistake. So limit it to people that you really trust and don't feel like you need to get the seal of approval from everybody. And that's why like working with a trusted advisor is great because you have one person and then maybe like one or two other people where who can like double check and make sure that everything looks solid. So, okay, we can go on to the next slide, which I believe is Michael.
Yes, thank you, Julian. I couldn't agree more. Some additional tips. We have so many for you today. So one of the best things that you can do before any application read or like any essay that you're going to write is reading. Read essays, read articles, memoirs, short stories, opinion pieces. Just read, okay? Anything that helps you notice how authors are able to capture their voice, how they structure their writing, the pacing, the details. That's going to give you ideas, all right? But I want to say this, but when you are reading other people's work, and we are sharing on the screen some tools, for example, the John Hopkins Essays That Work and Stanford's Let Me Introduce Myself. Those are great resources, not because you should copy their style or the topics, but because they can help you see the range, right? And what's possible in such a short amount of space. Some can be emotional, some are funny, which is some of my favorite. But what they all have in common is that how specific these essays are to who they are, their ability to reflect, and how they really capture their voice. Okay. Now, this is where I want to mention a caveat, okay, here, and I want to talk about AI just briefly. It is tempting to use AI to make your essay sound really polished and perfect, right? But the danger here is that you can quickly stop sounding like the essay loses its voice. So our advice here is that AI can be very helpful when it comes to brainstorming, thinking about the question, even grammar checks. But when it comes to like the core ideas, the story, the structure, and the language, it needs to come from you. Okay. It needs to come from you. I can tell immediately when somebody is using AI to write their essays, and you do not want that to be reflected during the admissions process. So as we start wrapping up this write-in section, I want to give you some examples or a framework to evaluate your own work. So Miranda, let's go to the last slide here. So this is a final framework that we want to share with you to kind of check your work, right? We want you to use the 4 Ps. The first P is purposeful. Does the essay answer the prompt? I make every student of mine write the question at the top of all of their drafts, right? Because you want to make sure that you are addressing the question at hand, right? Does it have a clear reason for existing, right? Is it purposeful, right? Is it not just a story? Does the story reveal something meaningful about you? The second P here is personal. Could this essay only be written by you and only you? In my opinion, that's the standard. Okay. If an essay could describes like 1,000 students, right? Like I worked hard. I learned teamwork. I want to help people. It needs to be more specific. It needs to be a reflection of who you are. The third P is powerful. Powerful does not mean dramatic, okay? I know I'm being dramatic today, but your essay doesn't have to be dramatic, right? It means that does the essay show growth? Does it show insight? Does it show maturity? Does it showcase a shift in your understanding about a specific topic, right? By the end, I think that the reader should feel like they know you better from the beginning, right? From any part of your essay. And then the fourth P is practical. This matters too, right? Is it organized? Is it clear? I do not like, there shouldn't be a reason why there are grammatical errors in that final essay that you're submitting, okay? And honestly, I always like to end with this. Does the tone sound like a thoughtful, 17-year-old high school student? Or does it sound like AI? Or like Julian mentioned, does it sound like a thesaurus, right? Or does it sound like your parents, right? And that's what we want to avoid. All right. And I'll leave you with this. So I want you to remember one thing. If you don't remember nothing from this presentation, the goal is not to sound perfect. The goal is to just sound like yourself. I hope that's helpful for you all. Miranda, we want to go to that next slide. Again, if you all have questions, go ahead and use the Q&A function, and we'd love to answer some of your questions today.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, that was wonderful. You definitely answered most of the questions, I feel like, in your presentation, but we do have a couple to go over. Someone had just asked, what is the best time frame, in your opinion, for the Common App submission?
Julian, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a very tricky question. It really depends. It depends on the deadlines that you're aiming for. So, if you're planning on applying early decision, which is a binding admission, so if you get in, you have to go. Um, Usually those applications are due in early November. So you have to start your essay. Ideally, anybody working on the Common Application essay should be starting in the summer. If you're applying early action, some deadlines, I know this is scary, but some are as like early as due as early as October. So like October 15th-ish. It really depends. Most early action deadlines are due in November, but I would say it depends on if you're applying early decision or early action, but either way, I'd say the sooner you can start it, the better. So this summer, aka next month, is ideal to start that essay.
Thank you so much. Um, we had one person ask, do you have any advice for a student who has taken a lot of challenging AP classes and has taken a lot of great extracurriculars, but has one or two B's or C's kind of pulling their grade down? Do they need to address that in any way? And if so, how?
That's a really good question and a really good question to be asking yourself now. Honestly, it depends. Okay. Let's say if you had a really rough freshman year, transitioning from middle school to high school is a challenge in its own. So if you earn a B or a C, generally that's okay. because admissions officers like to see a gradual increase in your grades, right? Because by junior senior year, you should understand how to study, how to seek help, right? But if junior year you are getting some C's and B's, you definitely want to use the additional section in the Common App to give some context, right? Because context matters. Did you have a family emergency come up that really distracted you from earning the best grades? Just use that portion of the application to provide more context in relation to the lower grades, right? But if it's ninth grade, don't worry too much about it. Later on in your high school career, definitely address it in your some in the additional section in the application.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael. We have one more from the Q&A box as well. Someone had asked, how might a student write about their experience with the Palisades wildfires in a way that is powerful without sounding cliche? I know it's kind of a big question, but if you have any advice, they're looking for some.
So I'll go ahead and answer this. Also a very interesting question. And it is tricky because here's the thing. Admission readers know that a lot of students experience this. So it depends on what your experience is or was. And it depends on what you did and how you changed from it. So if you think back to those essays, like the personal statements that I was talking about with like experiencing a challenge or whatever it might be, if you just say something like, the Palisades fire happened, then I was like really disappointed. I had to like move schools, my house XYZ, and then now I'm back and I'm doing something. Not it's we still see the challenge, but I want to see a little bit more. I want to see how you specifically were affected and how it changed you. What did you do differently after that? So if you experience this very traumatic situation, how have you changed from it? How has it inspired you to do something different now? What were you inspired to do? Did you volunteer in the community? Did you create an organization that is like prevents wildfires and forest fires or does things to limit that? What are the specific things? How did it affect you? And how did it transform you as a person? You don't have to have this incredible, crazy story. Admission readers know that students have these experiences. You just have to speak, again, like I'm saying, like speak honestly and from your heart about what the situation was and then what you did, if you did, to take action. But if you're just going to say, like, here's this experience, it was really hard, the end, that's not going to add any value because remember, the essay needs to focus, the personal statement needs to be 60 to 70% reflection. What did you learn? Why is this important? Why are you sharing this story with us? Think about the so what and what did you do? And also think about what is this showing the admission reader about who I am going to be on campus? What is this showing them about what I'm going to add to their campus? What is this showing them about my story, not just the community's story, my story? Feel free to add, Michael, if you'd like.
That was perfect.
Thank you so much, Julian. Okay, one more. I know you guys touched on this some already, but do you have any additional advice for hook statements in particular, something that's really going to grab an admissions attention?
It's such a hard question. I honestly, I don't know. I'll have to think about this. Julian, does anything come top of mind to you? I'm blanking out right now.
Yeah. Have fun. Do
Yeah.
something different. One thing that I like to do is like put us directly in the moment. Show us in a few sentences like what is actually happening. On one of our PowerPoints, we had a sentence and it was about like figure skating. Um, think about like putting us in the moment of something and you're having this experience and it's kind of like a showing us what your essay is going to be about without writing it in a very like basic format. I always like to go in a direction like that. So, like the sentence, my stomach dropped mid-rotation on my triple axle as I imagined the possibility of slamming into the ice. And your essay, maybe it's about like determination, grit, perseverance, and how you've transformed as a figure skater. Um, so think about doing something that's going to really pull the reader in. Um, it could even be like a one-word statement. But like I said, like a thing to avoid would be like doing like a letter to somebody else, starting with like "Dear blank." Like that's just
Or
indent.
or a quote, a famous quote. We see those so much. Please don't do that, right?
Don't do
I
it.
know like there's some amazing philosophers and they have some amazing quotes, but I would shy away from opening your personal statement with a quote. And honestly, I would just say put something together that would make the reader curious, right? Curious about you. Again, it doesn't have to be dramatic. Think of the moment, right? The object that we talked about earlier, or is it a sound? I love those pow, or like when people write a sound, I'm like, whoa, what is that? It immediately like reels me in. So again, have fun. Don't use a quote. And just be specific, to that specific moment that you want to write about.
And think about it this way, like when you're reading that for think about when everybody here think about when you are reading a headline or when you're reading the first sentence of like a news article. If
Yeah.
it immediately you're like, oh, this is boring, I don't want to read this, and you skim through, that's exactly you don't want to do that. Think about something that's going to make somebody read that one line and be like, I want to know more. Think
Yeah.
about things that you click on every day that you're like, oh, I want to know about that. That's what your first line should pull me in to say, I want to know more about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We just had one pop into the Q&A really quickly. They were wondering, is there anything of the essays that you guys have looked over in your experience, like a number one thing that has stuck out to you that you thought was like a great idea or a great prompt?
I mentioned this before, but I love, like unintentional comedy in the essays that really just makes me laugh. And I can almost picture the student saying something or doing something that really gives me an understanding of their personality and who they are. When I can gauge someone's personality in an essay, I immediately love it because it sticks out, right? I think it can be challenging to put something together that speaks to who you are, it's funny and highlights your personality. If you can do that, you are already at the top of having a stronger personal essay. So for me is personality, comedic relief, unintentional comedic relief in the essays always stick out to me.
And I will echo that. I love when I read a funny essay. Look, I've read thousands of essays as an admissions reader for the UCs, and they've been there are so many that I'm like, okay, I've read that. I've read that. I've read that. But they're like the one that sticks out to me that I read, every single part of that application was hilarious. They wrote about like working at Chipotle and how they tried to like work their way, weasel their way around the system and get free food, and that it helps them like build camaraderie with their teammates. It was hilarious. It's when I'm reading applications, like you have to remember we're reading very, very fast. But this one I was like, this is really funny and like I love this. I want to read all, I want to read more. The other ones that I think are really powerful, like I mentioned earlier, are those ones where you really show your vulnerability and
Yeah.
where you can admit Like, you know what? I was wrong here. I made a mistake. And it's not just, I was wrong, I made a mistake, the end. It's, I was wrong. I made this mistake. And here, most important part, here is how I grew. And here is who I am
Yeah.
now. And here's what I've done. So you really have to focus on the self-reflection. But like when you can admit to your faults, you're showing me, like I said earlier, that you are human. And that's what I want to see.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback of that for a few seconds here, I work with a lot of engineering students, computer science students, and I know the first thing you want to do is just talk about your achievements and what you've built and how you're this amazing coder, this amazing engineer. But some of the most powerful essays are the ones that they talk about a big problem that they're trying to solve and they just can't get to it, right? But they take us through the journey of the steps that they've took to potentially wanting to solve that problem, a web page that they just can't finish because it's so difficult. Just really showing the struggles of wanting to build something and how difficult it is. And those are usually the stronger engineering, sciencey essays that stand out to me.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. That's all of our questions. We're going to wrap up now. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Our contact info is on the screen right now. If you're interested in a consultation, that link is there as well. And just so everyone knows, this will be sent out tomorrow afternoon as well. We will send the webinar link of the recording to everyone that signed up. So you will all receive that tomorrow afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Julian and Michael, so much. And have a great rest of your night, everyone. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Take
Bye.
care.